things on your mind. For whatever reason, if someone is shy or they don't want to ask a question in front of everybody, that's why we hand out these community comment forms. And so if you want to just write out your question, we'll return the answer, or we'll try to find the answer and answer your question to the best of our ability. I do want to make a little note. This is a state-sponsored event. So some of you talked to me a little bit earlier and talked about a congressional campaign. I can't talk about a congressional campaign here. Forgive me. There'll be time to do that, but this is a state-sponsored event. Really, this is
no, you're fine.
Updating you on state policy, and it's my job up in Sacramento. And I want to make sure that I take your voices with me up to Sacramento. We had some challenging times up in Sacramento. The budget is not as deep of the deficit as it has been over the last 3 or 4 years, but we still have a major issue in terms of pension obligation in our debt in California. I'm happy to report to you that Governor Brown has come with a very strong 12-point pension reform plan, and myself, along with a lot of my colleagues, just introduced his ideas into legislation. We believe that in order to preserve pensions that are promised, you have to reform the pension system. Good news is people are living longer than before, and you can't continue a pension system where someone, for every one person that's working, 2 people are retired. And I believe we have been making promises to folks that we know we can't keep. So we absolutely need to have more contribution into the pension system for folks. And we also have to raise the retirement age. And I'm glad that Governor Brown has brought this issue forward. And it's been frustrating over the last few years. I actually introduced a bill last year, and I was shocked that it didn't get through. I thought it was a no-brainer. It came out of the Bell scandal. When I found out that Robert Rizzo, who was a city manager of Bell, even if convicted, if he lived a life expectancy, this is reported by the LA Times, he would, I think, collected was somewhere around $13 or $14 million from the taxpayers, even after being convicted as a city manager. And so I carried forward a bill, simply put, that if you commit a felony while doing people's work on the job, that you get the money back you put in, but you don't get matched from the taxpayers of California. Well, that bill stalled, which I was surprised. It failed in committee. And I actually went down to the governor's office to lobby Governor Brown on this issue. And Governor Brown actually put it part of his 12-point plan. So I'm happy that that will move forward. I think that's a no-brainer. But we need a bigger pension reform, and I'm happy that I think we might have an opportunity to get it done. And you'll be able to have a vote on it, by the way. We're going to be steadfast at making sure that we ratify it and send it to you, the people of California. And I know what a lot of folks say, hey, this ballot is going to be full of propositions. Let the legislators do the job. Why do you keep sending this to us? But the reason why we want it to go to you is because if we have real pension reform, say it's just passed in the legislature, it can be undone next year by majority vote. If we send it to you, the people of California, and you ratify it, the only way it can be undone is by going back to you, the people. So I know you're frustrated. I'm frustrated too with the ballot with 20, 25, 30 different initiatives. I'm frustrated just like you. But there's a reason for us wanting to have you to be the people who put it in, because then the only way to undo it, it's not next year's legislature, or next year, 2 years from now, it would be you to do that. And then the other thing I just want to point on that I worked on and took a leadership role is this confirmation of a trustee that oversees the CSU. At a time when we were having the record deficits in California, I personally took a voluntary pay cut before the Citizens Compensation Commission came forward with their recommendation to lower legislative pay. I was one of 3 state senators that didn't take a car because I felt that it's tough economic times, and so I thought everybody needed to be part of the solution. At that time, this gentleman actually led the charge to give a huge pay increase to the CSU president. In fact, it was a 14% increase, and if you look at what the salary base was, it was over $300,000. That's more than double what the governor makes. And that's just the base salary. It doesn't take into account the money that they get for housing and car, and if you look at the whole compensation package, it was almost $400,000. And I led the fight in the state Senate to not confirm this gentleman for reconfirmation. And they need 2/3 vote, and I convinced enough of my colleagues to block that. And every person who was on that commission that voted for this increase at that time, I thought was out of step with everyday citizens. And so we're going to continue to move forward, and I think it's important when we have these people on these commissions that they're responsive to the people of California. And one of the frustrations I have is we have too many commissions, and too many times the legislature empowers these commissions, and that takes your voice away. Look, if you don't like what I stand for, every 2 years or every 4 years, you get the ability to vote out your elected representatives. But far too many times, we send very important decisions to these commissioners that there's no accountability. And I think that's wrong, because I think if you elected your representatives to go up to Sacramento, Washington, or at the local level, and any time that you send it to a group of people that don't have to be accountable to the people, I think that goes away from what our founders had in mind in terms of representative government. So with that, I didn't want to take too much in terms of opening. I do want to make sure that I answer your questions, and we're going to be out probably about 10 to 9. So, and again, I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy day to be here this morning, and hopefully we have good dialogue. And if I can also add that you shouldn't expect me to agree with you 100% of the time. I mean, I always find it interesting. My wife actually served in the legislature at the same time as me, and there was a few bills where we disagreed, and people were shocked. I mean, you know, you're not going to agree with someone 100% of the time. You never will. And I always say, if you want someone to agree with you 100% of the time, you should run for office yourself. But even then, if you have an open mind, as you should, sometimes you'll change your mind as you move forward. And again, I think the best legislators are ones that are in the community, that listen to the folks in the community, understand the everyday concerns of their constituents, and take those voices back with them to Sacramento. So with that, I'd like to open up for any questions. Go ahead.
Here's the opportunity. What are things that you feel you're being improperly accused of or incorrectly? You know, I read the letters that talk about Tony Strickland, he did this wrong, and I don't believe it, but I thought maybe there's some that particularly irritate you that people accuse you of is not good.
Well, that's an interesting question. Look, everybody has a right to their opinion, and I've learned a long time ago that I can't please everybody, and everybody has a right to their opinion. Sometimes I respectfully disagree, but those things like that, you know, I come from this rich family or something. Look, my dad was a maintenance man. My first job was washing wheelchairs at a nursing home, and you know, my dad, like most of you, struggled to make ends meet. In fact, I still remember vividly as a kid where my dad went to work, and you know, he lost his job, no fault of his own, but he worked for a bank that got shut down. He went to work one day and it was just shut, and nothing impacts a family more than when someone, their mom or dad, loses their job. And I still remember that day vividly. And I think the great thing about this nation is I can come from my dad's, my hero. He served in Korea, Vietnam, as a maintenance man, and for the hard work that my parents did to allow me to serve in the state Senate is a privilege, and I never forget that. And that's what makes our nation great. Through hard work and determination, you can achieve anything. So I never really worry about the letters or the negative stuff, because there's a lot of positive folks that say you're doing a good job. I mean, that's part of democracy. If you have to like people, and if you can't take criticism, this is probably not the best job for you, and you're probably not a good job at it. So, you know, and that's democracy. It's up to the people to decide who they send. And I know every day that I'm there is a privilege, because I know there's a lot of able-bodied citizens in my district that would love to be in this position. And every day I walk on the floor of the Senate, I get chills, because I know I represent about 1 million people. And that's quite a responsibility, and I take that responsibility very seriously, and I think it's a privilege in the position I'm in. So for folks to say something, that's democracy, and I try to correct it sometimes, but you know, it doesn't bother me.
Is there any plan to stop Governor Brown from auctioning off carbon credits?
Well, again, that goes back to the commission side. There's a lot of what the bill AB 32 implemented. The job of the legislature, and it sends over to the Air Resources Board, and you know, and CARB, the California Air Resources Board. The majority of the legislature passed AB 32, so that's one of the things that's frustrating because, again, the legislature empowered this commission to implement the regs. And then it just keeps growing, and I think that's one of the biggest problems. Is that when I have concerns coming to me in the legislature, as we go forward, there was, by the way, there was an initiative just last year to try to undo AB 32, and it went down overwhelmingly. Again, that's about democracy. So it's really up to folks that when they see the impact, which I think would be very detrimental to the economy in California. Unfortunately, we have to articulate a little bit better and hopefully get a majority of folks that say, hey, look, this is going too far and it'll hurt our very economy here in California. We have the second highest unemployment rate in the nation, and a lot of jobs are leaving the state of California and going to other states.
There's a program sponsored by the state with the EDD. It's called Open, Outstanding Professionals Employment Network. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a fantastic program, and I believe it's still sponsored. And I want to make sure that it continues to be sponsored, where they have every 6 weeks they have a 5-day intensive placement workshop where people who've been out of work for a while go through this program where they learn how to look for jobs in the current economy. People who have been who are middle-aged, where they may have maybe their first time out of work for and once you fulfill the workshop and join one of their groups. One of the groups is called the Outreach Program, where 2 people go out to industrial parks and ask, to speak to the hiring manager, find out what their hiring trends are for the year, if they plan to hire or if they plan to downsize. Now, this whole program is a no-fee based program where the hiring manager doesn't have to take out an ad in Monster or the papers or whatever. And I got my job 8 years ago through that, and after being out of work for 7 months, it was a very proactive way of looking for work. When people get depressed because they can't find work, they're at home, sending out resumes online or whatever. And it's a way not only to help other people, but I found a job through that anyway, where I had a business card with my bullet points ready. So if someone said, "Oh, we have all these people that can fill your, if you have any openings, we have these many resumes of people that can fill an opening right away." And I said, we have marketing people, computer people, we even have graphic artists and photographers, of which I'm one. And my boss says, I'm looking for one. Boom.
Great. Congratulations.
And so I guess my point is that I'd like that program to be funded.
Okay.
Because a lot of people, many of the hiring managers didn't even know that we existed.
What's the program again?
It's called Open, Outstanding Professionals Employment Network.
Okay.
And it's based out of the CME EDD.
Okay, great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
You may have covered this because I was a bit late, but are you running for Congress?
Yeah. The answer is yes, I'm running for Congress, but I can't answer any questions regarding that because this is a state-sponsored event. And I apologize, but we'll have time to answer those kind of questions at another time, and I'll make sure that we do town halls regarding that campaign. But this is more of the state issues. I've been doing this ever since I first got elected because I think it's important, as I'm up in Sacramento, to do these community events to get input as we're going through legislation, as we're going through the upcoming year. So, thank you. Sir.
Yeah, what's the fiscal impact of the national health care coverage? I see other states suing to keep it from being implemented. California's been silent.
Well, no, California hasn't been silent, and they're in fact rushing to implement the healthcare plan from the Obama administration. In fact, I'm vice chair of the health committee up in Sacramento, and one of my arguments was whether you agree with this or not, because we could all agree to disagree, and you know, in Sacramento, the majority would support the Obama healthcare plan. I could go into why I'm opposed to it. But whether you support it or not, I think it's foolish for California to rush to implement and spend all this money when we don't have a lot of the money, knowing that the courts can throw it out based on the mandate that's going through the Supreme Court, one, or if there was a new president, that every one of the other candidates is saying that they're going to repeal. So whether you support it or not, for California, when we have limited resources right now to speed up and implement, I think is a mistake. Because
benefits to it?
Excuse me?
Do you see any benefits to it?
To speeding up?
No, to the healthcare reform. Are there any benefits? Because everybody knows that.
Are you for it or against it?
I'm against it. I'm totally against it. In fact, I've taken a leadership role against it. I think, you know, if you want the efficiency of the DMV and the compassion of the IRS to run your healthcare system, this is for you. And then when you look at, look, we have clear problems with the healthcare system. We need to reform the healthcare system. But there's something even worse than what's going on in the federal government going through the legislature right now. Luckily, we just killed it. It was a bill by Senator Mark Leno that would have made it illegal to own private healthcare insurance. And actually, it got through the assembly, and it was only two votes short in the state senate. This is something that is gone through, and by the way, it went through the legislature when Schwarzenegger was governor, and Schwarzenegger did the veto. So, healthcare policy, we need a longer discussion on some of the reforms. One of those reforms I would have for risk pools, for example, right now it's illegal to go across state lines. I would make it ability to go across state lines to have bigger risk pools. That way it would drop the price of healthcare coverage. That would help, by the way, on the pre-existing conditions, when people talk about pre-existing conditions, because no one, you know, everybody wants to make sure that people are taken care of. And the spiral cost of healthcare. Not every healthcare policy should be covered. Everything shouldn't be covered over every healthcare policy. It just drives the price up. And one of the problems we have in healthcare in California is we have something where we can't get turned away. It's a federal policy. When you go in the emergency room, it becomes charity care. And a lot of folks do their, you know, if you ever go to an emergency room, I do it a lot, walking through, there's a lot of folks that, there's long lines in the emergency room because people are going there for their primary care because they know they can't get turned away. And in rural areas, they're shutting down a lot of these emergency rooms, and that can end up having people cost them their lives based on how quick they need to get to an emergency room. So, and then when you talk about government-run healthcare, if you look at Canada, for example, the governor, what would be the equivalent of the governor of a province, came down here for his healthcare. If you ever go to Seattle, you'll see a lot of Canadians coming down because they have long lines. One, they ration healthcare. Two, they have long lines for simple procedures. Hip replacement takes over 1.5 years in Canada. Here, you can get it, you know, almost immediately. And so, the quality care is always something. Access is extremely important, but the quality of care as well. And so, I always say it's almost like a Vegas buffet. If you've ever been to a Vegas buffet, you know, there's plenty of access to the food, but the quality is not as good as some of the other areas. And it's almost like this healthcare will be abundant, people will use it, and what happens is, again, the Vegas buffet, you have a lot of food left over on your plate. People will go and take a lot of healthcare, and they'll go, and then even when they don't need it, they'll go because they know it's paid for. And I think we need meaningful reforms going forward, but I don't think the Obama way is to go, and especially here in California with the precious dollars to speed up that process, I think is a mistake. Yeah.
Senator, first of all, thank you for all the years that you've been a senator, and I really appreciate you making yourself available to us. I'd like to ask you about the HR 1837, the water bill in the Central Valley that provides water to the Central Valley. I'm very concerned about that. It's a Nunez bill legislative like Steinberg, who
we've met with a lot of growers in the San Joaquin Valley, and from time to time I drive through the San Joaquin Valley, and you'll see signs up there, the government created drought. There's families that come to my office, and our generations have fed the world for years, and we can't even feed our kids. Because the Delta smelt, they've dropped the ability to bring water, meaningful water, to be able to feed the world. And exactly. And so I'm very supportive of fixing that situation, so we make sure we get water from Northern California through the San Joaquin Valley for our growers, and then come down to Southern California.
But isn't the federal government part of that problem?
It is. It is. That's why the lady mentioned the Devin Nunes bill. And the only reason why, I don't want to get into federal policy, I support the bill. But since Steinberg came out against it, and our job as a state is to weigh in on a very important state message and state issue, that water is a dramatic issue that we're frustrated that the federal government doesn't allow the water to go through, because agriculture is one of our biggest industries in California. And by the way, the second highest unemployment rate in the nation. Think about that. With the diverse economy we have here in California, you understand why Nevada is number one. In a down economy, Nevada is pretty much, entertainment and travel and tourism. But we have a diverse economy. We have agriculture, high tech, biotech, entertainment. There's no reason why we should have the second highest unemployment rate in the nation. In fact, when you look at Michigan, the auto industry, we have a higher unemployment rate than them. And I think the number 1, 2, and 3 priority for every legislator should be, what are we going to do to create jobs, put people back to work? Because that will, by the way, help fix your budget situation by growing the economy. And we're doing the wrong things, in my opinion, in Sacramento to able to foster economic growth and put people back to work. Gentlemen, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I got a question about workers' comp insurance through the state of California. Is there any plans to fix it to where, like, when you get run over by an 8,000-pound SUV pulling a trailer and you go to the doctor and they say, you've got arthritis, go home. Sorry.
I didn't hear that last sentence.
You've got arthritis, malignant arthritis all over your body, now go home. The only treatment I received from that is what I paid for out of my own pocket. Are there any plans in the assembly or anything to fix that? Because I also have a friend who was injured quite severely, and my question is 21 hours a reasonable amount of time to wait to get emergency medical treatment?
The answer on the 21 hours is no, obviously. 2, I don't know what the private health care plan that you have, that's part of it. And then,
I didn't. I paid for it out of my pocket.
No, I understand. So, that's part of not having the health. Was there a lawsuit involved? Was there...
No, I was pretty much told that he didn't know he hit me, even though his SUV ran completely over me, and there was nothing that could be done. Period. End of discussion. Go home. You don't get no retraining, no nothing. Just get out. Is there any plans to fix that? Any kind of plan?
Well, I would say some of the remedies that you have if you got hit by a truck would be to the company. There'll be some liability there.
Now, if he doesn't know he hit you, you can't even get his information. And
well, if you send me the information, let my staff look into some of that. We do that casework all the time. Please send that to me. Sir.
Senator, thank you. I have a 2-part question. One I think would help revenue for California. And just hear me out first before I get a lot of flack for this, but support driver's licenses for illegal aliens, provided that they're renewed annually and that they pay $500. Because for years we've been paying their benefits. They need to help out too. So I think that you could start with $500 and settle for $250. If there are 4 million illegal aliens in California that want to drive, that's some serious money. And they do have money. Second, I don't think it's fair. Well, look at it this way. 1970s, the Democrats have controlled California. Occasionally get a Republican governor like Schwarzenegger, or a Republican governor like McMahon. Problem is that I feel that representation is too small in California. We have 80 state assembly seats, 40 state senator seats. The state of New York has 150 members in their state legislature, lower courts. They have a Republican legislature. The Senate's not, the Senate's Democrat, but the state of New Hampshire has 400 members. Tiny little state of New Hampshire, 1.2 million people, 400 members in the legislature. Since the election results during Governor Jerry Brown, basically we had 35 counties that went Republican, 23 that went Democrat, but they still won overall. We were able to change our government so that, say for example, we had 2 state senators per county, localizing the state senate elections. Republicans would at least control the state senate. Just based on the governor, they kicked our butt. Further, if New York has 150 members in the state assembly, and they have 20 million people for the state, we have 37 million people. Why do we have 8? I'm saying it seems fairer if we had 200 seats, for example. Districts would be a lot smaller. Campaign costs would be a lot cheaper. You can spend a lot more time with us having to travel from here to here and there to there. Sure. And I think don't we want more minorities, more women, persons with disabilities to get elected to the state instead of multi-millionaire lawyers and crazy people?
Well, forget the Republican Democrat. The point is, for example, California Forward has a proposal going forward just like that. It's headed by California Forward. For those of you that don't know, was run by Leon Panetta before he went to the Obama administration. Now it's former Speaker Bob Hertzberg. And one of the reforms they have in there is to expand the state assembly and the state senate in order to make sure that their elected representatives are more responsive. I actually like that idea. I think we need to take a look at that idea. When you look at 40 state senate seats and 80 state assembly seats, let's just look at the state senate. It's been 40 for a long time, and we've had huge growth in California. And for those of you that don't know, a state senate seat represents about 1 million people. It is hard to get around and be a true representative of the whole district and get to the community as much as you can. I've tried my best, but when you represent 1 million people, put it in perspective, a house seat is 700,000 people. And some would say that's even too much. So if you, like other states, if you expand out, it would be better to have less constituents per member. That way your voice is being heard in Sacramento or even in Washington. So I'm very open to California Forward, but it's not Republican-Democrat issue, because California Forward is a Democratic organization. This is an idea that I think has come because, at least in Congress, when you have population shifts, they adjust your representation. For example, we had a census this last year, and California remained even in congressional representation, but because of growth, Texas gained 4 congressional seats, Florida gained 2, some of the Northeast lost a seat or 2, and they shift based on population of what each state can represent. It's been fixed in California for a long time, and I think 1 million people per senator is a little too much to be a true representative government to go up to Sacramento. So I'm very open to that reform going forward. Go ahead, Doug.
Tony, recently the legislature wiped out the redevelopment agencies. Pro or con, not the issue at this point. But part of the idea was that all the income would come back to the state and would be redistributed. But two of the byproducts is employment. All the people that were being employed under those programs are now unemployed. And there's a huge mess that's been left behind as people try to deal with those issues. What's being done legislatively to try to address that mess, because there are huge bond debts issues and just some of the whole infrastructure? What are you doing to try to clean up some of that and maybe address some of the good that was done while negating some of the bad that was done also?
Well, in order to answer, you got to go back to the original bill. The original bill, we actually helped try to find a reform initiative for redevelopment.
Right, that was the pay to play.
That was the Huff bill.
Right.
That we said, hey, look, there's no question there's some abuse within redevelopment. Let's fix that. Let's reform it instead of just eliminate it completely. But it got eliminated completely. Now we try to work with Alex Padilla on because there's many complex issues where, as you mentioned, bondholders and everything else. But as we brought that bill forward, Governor Brown said it's a non-starter. And there's no reason, I mean, if Governor Brown just says, I'm going to veto any reform that you have, then Steinberg then announced, well, if Brown's not going to be there, we're not going to push this bill. So we're waiting to see, and we keep pushing to try to come up with some reform to help fix some of the many problems that now a lot of local communities are facing in terms of the redevelopment issue.
One of the things that I'm hearing you say during this process that I think I've heard in other areas is that the minute that the governor comes out and says, I'm not doing this, the legislature retreats. And my reaction has been, and we've conversed about this in the past, is all it takes is enough people in the legislature looking in the face and saying, I don't really care, we're voting you down. You don't have that.
Correct, but you have to have the support of the legislators. And what I said just recently is Brown came out and Steinberg then said, because of the governor, we actually brought up a veto override just about a week and a half ago, and it didn't get votes because you need 2/3. I think the legislature does need to stand up. When they're trying to raise tuition rates on kids, they're raising huge salaries for all the administrators and the presidents. It's just wrong. And as you know, I've been fighting for the special needs community for a long time. And the other problem is they'll put in a budget, what we call a budget trailer bill. I don't want to talk too much inside baseball. They'll put those cuts along with other meaningful reductions. And so if you don't get that done, you don't get the other meaningful reductions. They put it into a larger piece of legislation. And sometimes you're put in a box where there's a huge budget bill that you might disagree with, aptly disagree with 10, 15% of that bill, but 80% of that bill is absolutely necessary, and that's what's always very difficult when you talk about some of the budget issues and budget trailer bills. There's no question that disproportionate share of these reductions have gone to special needs. Gentleman showed me a letter from the state agency saying he had to recycle all of his water, and if he doesn't, he has penalties. And another state agency said he couldn't recycle any of his water, and again with penalties. And he said, Senator, I'm happy to do what you want to do, but I can't do all of it and none of it at the same time. And that gives you a point, but it happens to many constituents who call it state agency, and they get referred to another one, and back to the original one, because you have too many overlapping, and then they're not communicating, giving conflicting different rules and regulations. And so what my bill did is model after the federal BRAC, because if you remember when we won the Cold War, they wanted to close military bases to consolidate. Every time it came up, the congressman or the senator from the home district would say no. So they created a commission. Then they saw where there was overlap and came up with the Congress for a simple up or down vote. I think we need to do the same thing in terms of Sacramento. One is save a lot of money, and on top of the savings, you become more efficient. For example, do you really need a board of equalization and a franchise tax board? I would say probably not. And when you become more efficient and you get more oversight, then you don't have to make some of these tough decisions in terms of what's going on in the Letterman Act. And we do need more oversight and reform. And then also, when you have reductions, there's a lot of ballot box budgeting where the Letterman Act is not under this, but for example, there's certain monies that have passed through initiatives that tie our hands and we can't go there. We can only go there, for example, on education funding, Prop 98, 172 in terms of public safety funding. And there's a whole bunch of other money that there's just the base that the voters voted for. So, in terms of the discretionary, there's not a lot of discretionary funding. So that's why also it's been very difficult to get there.
We really appreciate your support and campaign, but the trailer bill is up for extension. We have your help with this.
I will. I'll work hard on it. And you know, I'm which I am an actor very much. So I will work as hard as I can.
As I heard it say, on the post, a couple of follow-up questions on that. Number one, what's the life of your energy? Number two,
We're going forward on and pretty far along on the first event. You need to be mindful of the environment. I was one of a few legislators on the Republican side that voted for renewable energy. But when you talk about EV2, the ridiculous sense that other states, we live in a global economy. We can't China and other countries. When we talk about this piece of legislation, we can't even do it in Arizona or Nevada because we're handcuffing private industry here in California. Well, I think when you look at the science, yes, of course, there's climate warming. There's also there was climate cooling earlier in the 1970s. I remember they talked about climate cooling. I'm very mindful of having a safe environment. We need to do whatever we can. We live in California in large part because we love our environment in the state, so we need to do what we can to preserve a safe environment. But we have to have a balance, and balancing a safe environment and a strong economy is the key. I think EV32 goes a little bit too far. So I will be very mindful as issues come before me to make sure that we have that clear balance between the two.
so you're saying that climate is warming now and
That was the argument of the scientists back in the 1970s that we have global cooling. Right now, a lot of scientists say we have global warming. Is there man-made? I'm not a scientist. A lot of scientists say there is. But a lot of say there's not. Right? Exactly. That's why I call it climate change instead of global warming. What they call liberal progressive changing their name too. Right. So to answer your question, you got to be mindful. You can't. In my opinion, AB32 would be very detrimental to our economy here in California, and we have major problems here in California, and we just can't afford to go that far.
Senator David Hart, Southern California, 84 unelected officials who are going to vote on the future of the city that region. We're voting housing tax dollars for our transportation, for how our towers are going to work. They're all one size fits all plan. These are unelected officials. It's unconstitutional to vote those on. SCAG moves forward as a part of the free network for the one world government. What are you going to do about that?
Well, I've been trying to fight for reform and not continue to have a legislature give organizations power. It should be within, as I said earlier, elected power.
And Hart on the board of SCAG, she's a member director. Isn't that a conflict of interest for her to be on the organization and running for an office?
I don't know if it's conflict. All I know is it shouldn't happen. I don't know if I'm not. I don't know if it's not, but I'm not willing to say it's conflict. What I am willing to say is shame on us for continuing to empower be able to, as a citizen, affect change if you don't like what's going on in your government. And if you can't affect SCAG, can't affect Air Resources Board, Coastal Commission, that's affecting the future of California so dramatically. I just think that's wrong. I think these commissions need to come back to the legislature. The legislature should do their job instead of saying, well, it's some commission, and have the citizens hold those legislators accountable. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and we need to stop this from happening. And I'm trying to find those things.
These meetings are held on a very limited basis. They're held during the day when people work, so that they're very attended to meetings and all of them in our county. They're talking about some millions of dollars in an already strapped state. And it's something that will affect our lives so dramatically on so many different levels, whether it's transportation, where we live, how much we're paying out taxes, everything, energy consumption. And it seems like it is not a legislative thing, but all of these steps are being put into place with a goal date of when where is this coming from? What can we do? You don't hear about this paper politics or anything, and yet it's already.
And when you go to take off the day of work, it's run by staff. It's really run by staff. The decision's made before you show up. And when you decide to show up, and you're showing up, you're expressing your voice and concern, you're ignored. Well, again, we need to write letters to others, talk about how frustrated you are. We need to change public policy. We need to change people who pass these legislation. We're too cowardly for it. That's the only way. We're a representative.
This is the problem in California. Okay? Too many
Could you speak up, please?
It boggles me, my mind about all these laws that are taking place without the American people knowing. how do we find out who's doing all this and have it up on the computer, people, government, or something, give us that information.
Join a tea party. Join a tea
Well,
party.
I'd love to, it's a party.
Not security, the Tea Party.
But, you know, also to all these commissioners and all these city workers.
You're doing something. You're doing something.
Everybody, how do we know how much they're making? Shouldn't there be a cap? Shouldn't we just make sure that these people just do their job and not, post it? We want to know how much you make, because we pay, and if this is beginning to be like a tyranny, I like people should get together and just throw everybody out of
The
Congress.
answer is should be on the internet. The answer is yes, yes, and yes. It should be on the internet. You can request and get it from the public records request, but that takes time. So to answer your question, it should be up on the internet. I support openness because it's not legislators or governors' money. It's your money. You have a right to know. You have a right how much it's costing. And by the way, that's why I sued Ray Davis during the energy crisis when he tried to keep the energy costs hidden. I took him to court under the public records request because he refused to disclose that. We found out that he tried to lock in these long-term power contracts at a higher price than the worst price in the spot market. And energy companies had that PR. They renegotiated. We say rate here is billions of dollars. But I had to take him to court. It should be open for everybody. And then on the other point, and again, last point. I think we meet too much in Sacramento. When you look at a state like Texas, they meet 3 months every 2 years. There will be a part-time legislature initiative that they're pushing. And I've been up there. I think there's a lot of legislators who measure their success on how many bills they pass. And I think they come up with ridiculous regulation. It's not necessary because they see some in the newspaper and they say, oh, there ought to be a law. I don't think you can pass a law for every bill around the, at some point there has to be personal responsibility from the individual. This is my opinion. And I also believe you can have a part-time legislature where you meet 3 months or 4 months every 2 years, and then you go back and live under the laws. So I'm supportive of that initiative, and I think that'd be very helpful for California moving forward. So let me thank you. If I can just say thank you once again. I'm sorry, time seemed to go by really quickly. If I didn't get your question, or again, if there's a question that is on your mind that you might not want to ask in front of the group, you do have these forms right here. Please fill them out, give them to my staff, and I'll try to respond to you as fast as we can, and as responsive as we can. And again, I want to thank you. It's such a privilege to serve and represent you up in Sacramento. I'm going to do the best job I can to try to make a difference for our future of the state. And again, I really appreciate you taking time in your Saturday morning to be with us this morning. And I wish you all nothing but the best and have a wonderful Thanks for coming. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate you coming. Thanks for coming. Officer, thanks for coming. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thank you.